very thankful. We are very thankful to our interlocutor who's agreed to participate in today's talk, and that's Professor K. Satyanarayana. Professor K. Satyanarayana is a professor at the Department of Cultural Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University in Hyderabad. Dr. Satyanarayana is involved in teaching and research in the field of Dalit studies and has presented papers at national and international levels and has published in the areas of Dalit studies, literary history, Indian writing in English, and critical theory. He's co-edited the book No Alphabet in Sight, a dossier of Dalit writings from Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Dalit studies. Today's speaker is Dr. Chandrabhanu, who is an assistant professor at O.P. Jindal Global University in Sonipat and holds a PhD from George August University in Göttingen. He studies the Dalit movement, politics, the left politics, democracy, agrarian history, and labor migration with a focus on colonial South India. His articles have appeared in journals such as the IESHR and EPW. So thank you to Dr. Chandrabhanu for agreeing to present your work with us here, share your work with us here today, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Swati. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the Kidki collection for the opportunity. I'm happy that I'm presenting my talk in front of Professor Rupa, who just joined. And I'm also happy that Professor K. Satyanarayana agreed to discuss my talk. Okay, uh, should I start?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah. You, like I said, you have about 30 to 35 minutes. So.
Sure, sure. Uh, See, this paper is largely based on my PhD thesis, and afterwards I have also continued my research. So this is my paper based on my thesis. Okay, in this paper, what I am going to argue is there are 4 points. First, I am going to argue in the case of late 19th and early 20th century, for Dalits, caste is largely class, and this is when we see class from the perspective of Marxism and developments within it. And I have drawn from the Charles Tilley's argument of durable inequality and categorical inequality. So, based on that, I will elaborate in my talk that caste is class in case of Dalits. And then I have also argued in this paper that the Dalit intellectuals consider themselves as both caste and class. For them, in the early 19th century, the caste and class were not so really antagonistic categories. They themselves presented in many times, on many occasions, as if that they're doing class politics as well. And the third point I would be dealing is in the 1930s, Dalit activists actively embraced socialism and Marxism, and they considered socialism will liberate their oppression, and for that they actively took part in the socialist and Marxist political movements, and they were one of the key pillars in the development of the Marxist politics in colonial Andhra. Uh, it's their base that really helped the Communist Party to grow in the coming decades. However, the fourth point I'll be arguing is that, however, the party communism or the upper caste leadership of the CPI did not appreciate the Dalit politics or the Dalit liberation politics, and rather what they did is they joined hands substantially for a very long time with the Indian National Congress, and they also sidelined the demands of the Dalits, particularly the Dalit demand for separate electorates as well as Dalit demand for land question. And when CPI defined the concept of land to the tiller, they defined that the land should be distributed to the tenants when they abolish Jamindari system. And in this land distribution, they don't have agricultural laborers as someone who would get land. And they were articulating that agricultural laborers would get living wages, right? So that was the CPI's position in the 1930s and 1940s. So therefore, Dalits largely in the coming decades remained away from the CPI politics, and they remained antagonists of the communist politics, right? Now I will elaborate each these points one by one. In case of late 19th century, the caste was primarily a line between Dalits and the caste villagers. And in case of villages, the upper caste or the dominant caste were the landholders, and also they had the social status and social power. And at the same time, Dalits were, by and large, formed the bulk of agricultural laborers. They were landless laborers and free laborers. And in Telugu, you have terms like Paleru. And, this term was not something early 20th century's term, but it was there even in the early 19th century. So in the early 19th century records, also colonial officials did find that there were palerus who work on land mainly. So they also know that some of their officers, they discussed that when they were thinking of Raitwari system, some of the officials themselves raised a question that we are not really identifying who is working on land. So they know that even in the early 19th century, they know that some of the colonial officials that they were not really identifying the landless laborers who were actually working on land. So the Raitwari system, in fact, when they were recognizing the landholders, this was largely based on the role of the village elite. So village elite, the landed owners were by and large same. So the village headman and the village accountant, those were the one who play key role in identifying the landholders. So, what we see is in the 19th century, Dalits largely appeared as landless laborers. Even the census reports of 1911 and 1920 tells us that they forms the bulk of the landless laborers. And the difference between them, like the upper caste landholders were someone who had the privileges and social status, and the landless laborers, not only they were landless laborers but also untouchables. They face everyday discrimination. So, when we see from the Charles, see in the classical Marxism, it is assumed that when scholars see this Marxism in the context applied in the context of India, they have not seen this uh, uh, landlessness or the propertylessness as the key element of the identifying working class. They had a different vision. I will further explain in the when it comes to the CPI's discourse. But what happened is basically they have not seen the landless laborers mainly as working class, but they see this working class category, thinking that they were coming with the economic categorization. They were always already in the opinion that the Dalits are the caste category. So they have not seen that Dalits were also landless laborers. So in the 19th century, uh, instead of wider historiographical understanding, Dalits forms bulk of the working class. So that is the point. And the second point is how Dalit intellectuals and Adi-Andhra intellectuals represented themselves in their writings and in their speeches. Uh, Swati, can you show me my PPT here? I think.
I think you can move, you have control to move move the PPT.
Okay.
It's not, uh, just move it once. It hasn't moved yet.
Is it visible for you?
The
It's
PPT
visible.
is visible. Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you. No,
But
because
it's
I.
not moved. You're still on slide one only.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
So,
it's working now.
yes.
okay. So in the in see this is one poem from Kusuma Dharmanna's Magodin Nalladortanamu. So he was writing about landless laborers. So he was writing, even after working 12 months as paleru, we have to starve, we cannot repay the debts. And he also wrote kapus, farmers, scolders, palikapu. I mean, he is identifying themselves as palikapu, sharecroppers, and using abusing abusive language, including mother and wife. They attack and kick us. So he was describing themselves as exploited agricultural laborers. And they always see in the 1920s and 1930s, their oppressor or exploiter is farmer, that is right, uh, property owner or the landholder. And there is a petition from the Dalit organizations to the Simon Commission in 1928. So it is a petition by three organizations of South India: Adi-Andhra Mahasabha and Adi Dravida Mahasabha and Arundhati of Madras Presidency. Right? So these three organizations presented a petition, and in this petition, this paragraph is a part. And they wrote, the poor right who writes to the newspapers is generally a mirasidar or some other superior landholder who has sometimes never seen his land and does not even know the names of different varieties of rice. He is perhaps an attorney, perhaps an official, often a schoolboy, whom government is preparing at great expense to take a university degree, but he is very seldom a right in more than name. Too often he merely draws rent from his fields, and neither cares nor knows how the cultivator or the farm laborer lives. Sometimes, indeed, he has farm laborers of his own who lives in styles and no kindness neither from God nor man. But he mounts a Madras platform and is eloquent on the subject of the Indian nation, seeing no inconsistency in demanding equal rights for all. So, Adi Andhra and our the Dalit activists in the 1920s see Rayat is someone not like no, in the mainstream scholarship, the Rayat is someone a victim. But in case of Dalit writings and Dalit activism, the Rayat is someone who exploits the laborers. So they see that Rayat is someone as property holder, and when we apply Marxist language here, they forms in the category of petty bourgeoisie, and landless laborers forms into the working class. And in the same petition, in other place, I have not mentioned that paragraph here. In other place, they describe themselves as classless category. So they identified that there are two classes in the society. One, their class is casteless society, and then other is caste Hindu society. Right. So in the 1920s, Dalit intellectuals largely see that they are the victims, they are the landless laborers, and they work on land, they produce, not the right. So they produce wealth. And similarly, there was another activist called Chandraya. He wrote in Andhra Patrika in some other article. He provides a detailed explanation, description of the village structure. He says that how rights as a group works against landless laborers, particularly Dalits, and they always work against Dalits not acquiring land, not able to increase their wealth. And in fact, he told that Chandraya, because of the riots exploitation, many of landless laborers migrate to Southeast Asian countries or other colonial world, even though there were various hardships for them. So he says that the caste oppression or rights exploitation was one reason many of landless laborers, particularly Dalit laborers, migrate from South India to other parts of the world. Right, and of course, again, this is a counter narrative to the nationalist discourse about migrations. They say, for the migration, the colonial state is the main reason, and colonial state should stop the migrations. This is the elite version. And in Dalit intellectuals see the migration is because of the caste exploitation or the class exploitation. And then we should see how was Dalits influenced by the socialism in the 1930s. In the 1930s, definitely Dalits considerably influenced by the socialism. There are various reasons. In the 1930s, we know that there was Great Depression, and because of that, and for other reasons, in the 1930s, there was a widespread labor activism in the rural Andhra. And most of these organizations were landless labor organizations, and many times they were very much closely worked with Adi-Andhra Mahasabha, and their agitations were for rise of wages, for rise of not only wages, and they also hesitated for acquiring lands. They sent some petitions to the colonial state. Of course, these petitions were there even in the 1910s and 1920s. But even in the 1930s, they slightly changed their language. They focused more on economic issues compared to the 1920s, and we may consider this as the influence of the socialism, because socialism is considered more of economic politics, economics, politics based on economics. And because of this, in 1935, in the 8th Adi-Andhra state level conference, they have decided, that is Adi-Andhra Mahasabha, that's Dalits organization, decided that they should also start Andhra Agricultural Labor Association. So earlier, from 1917 to 1935, they were primarily doing politics in the name of Adi-Andhra Mahasabha. Now they also considered that having an organization in the name of Andhra Agricultural Labor Association was important. And the Adi-Andhra leaders, by collaborating with some of the socialist leaders in colonial Andhra, they founded the first Andhra Agricultural Labor Association in 1937 in Nellore. And after that, they actively formed agricultural labor associations in various districts of colonial Andhra, not only in Nellore, but in all the coastal Andhra districts. They formed agriculture labor associations. And at the same time, many Dalit intellectuals were also praising socialism in their various public meetings and their writings as well. So Kusumadharmana was again a very important intellectual. In the 1990s, he was very radical Dalit activist who was trying to reform Congress or criticize Congress to push them to take up Dalit cause seriously. And now in the 1930s, he embraced socialism, and he now considered that socialism is something that can emancipate oppressed communities across the world. He was of the opinion that socialism was spreading across the world, and he sees that both Ambedkar and Nehru were also socialists. So, in his 1936 speech in Vijayanagaram, he argued that the foundation of independent Labour Party and Nehru's speeches and the various organizations in the colonial world, all they represent the socialist wave. So he believed that there was a socialist wave, and in fact he was influenced in his writings in Harijana Shatakamu, which is considered a very Dalit writing. But in this writing also, he wrote two poems. Uh, yeah, this is Harijana Shatakamu, 1933 front page, and his photo in 1933 is Harijana Shatakamu. Of course, now in the market we have 2004 publication, but this is 1933's copy, and in which you could see Kusumadharmanna's photo. Yeah, he wrote two poems in this Harijana Shatakamu. One who invested the capital, exploited the toil of poor, and became rich. In all sides of earth emerged capitalists. The whole universe became a hell. Happiness and peace disappeared. Life became painful, and illusions melted away. Right? So he's looking at the world as capitalist world. In the 1920s, this language was not there in his writings. In the 1930s, his language changed. Now he is using the vocabulary of Marxism. Of course, in the 1920s and even before that, he was very clear of Dalit exploitation. It's not that he first time saw that Dalits were exploited by the upper caste landholders. We have seen in Magodinala Doratanamu, written in 1922. Then also he was very clear that Dalit laborers were exploited working class. But only difference is that now he is using the vocabulary of Marxism. So what he is doing now is he is using the Marxist language for the Dalit cause. It's not that Marxists came and told them how Dalit laborers were exploited. No, as we see in the Marxist textbooks or Marxist books, in the Andhra Communist history book also, you see that they came in the 1930s, so they explained what is economic exploitation, and they accused Dalit activists that until 1930s they were not aware of economic exploitation. But that is not exactly right. See, they know that they were exploited community in the 1920s and even in 1920s. Only difference is in the 1930s they also adapted the Marxist language. So they were trying to use this Marxist politics for the Dalit emancipation. So they don't have the something like blindness of their economic exploitation before that. And then in the late 1930s, uh, yeah, here is another important photograph of Kusumar Manna, where he strongly argued for socialist politics. He considered that we are part of the labor politics. In 1936, this conference was very important for various reasons. Uh, Here he spoke with two layers. On the one hand, he says that in 1936 that they should embrace the call of Ambedkar renunciation of Hinduism, and he also said we should embrace socialism. And when he say we should embrace socialism, he was thinking that Ambedkar was also an socialist, and that socialism is an anti-caste politics for him. Not that socialism is only a anti-class politics or working class politics. And then you have in the 1930s the party communism and the Dalits involvement in the CPI CPM, sorry, not CPM, CSP. CSP means Congress Socialist Party. It was a slender group in Indian National Congress, and within this CSP, CPI was a part. Of course, we know that CPI had a different trajectory, and I will come a bit later about that. In the late 1930s, many Dalit activists actually took part in CPI, and some of the important leaders of that time were Namburi Srinivas Rao, Guntur Babanayya, Govada Nirikshan Rao. They were popular Dalit activists of CPI at this time. And they not only just joined the party, they actively traveled across Andhra Pradesh. They wrote literature, they took part in agitations, they all went to jail when there was repression against the CPI. And most important thing is they actively worked to the spread of socialist politics and socialist ideology. And this is the first page of a book written by Govada Nirikshan Rao, and the title of this book is Ukku Manishi, means steel man. Ukku Manishi is referring to Stalin, the the head of the USSR at that time. So he wrote this biography of Stalin in Telugu. Probably this is the first biography of Stalin written in India by any other activist. In 1938, I don't know, at least for my knowledge, there was no biography of Stalin written by anyone, and this biography came in 1938 and written by a Dalit communist. So the Dalit left activists were quite active than many upper caste communists at this time, and they actively worked for the strengthening of CPI. And another thing is that they were also very active in Andhra Agricultural Labor Association. Andhra Agricultural Labor Association actually paved the base for the CPI in the late 1930s. So CPI got the ranks of Dalits primarily via the route of Andhra agricultural laborers. So most of the Andhra agricultural laborer activists in the late 1930s became the leaders of, activists of the CPI in the coming decades, by at least after the Second World War, right? So in this sense, the uh, CPI got the elaborate. This is the second page of Stalin's biography, and there are some details. And this book, in this book, he writes. Uh, Govard Nirikshan Rao writes that socialism is an ideology that eradicates all forms of inequality. So he was very clear that no, it's not only against the class politics or the economic categorization, and he was trying to see that all forms of inequality. So when they were thinking of this socialist or Marxist politics, they were thinking that they were also doing anti-caste politics, and they thought that they are actually strengthening the CPI for the sake of Dalits, not necessarily for the party communism or party capturing the state power, right? And then the fourth point is the response of the elite leadership of CPI to Dalit cause. And see, Dalit leadership, actually formed the bulk of CPI. But at the same time, they had two important demands by this time. That one is acquiring land for Dalits, and second is the separate electorates. And all the Dalit activists of this time, those who were in CPI also were in favor of separate electorates and Dalits getting land. However, CPI, the moment it joined, the moment their leadership speak, they were talking the class politics entirely in different language. For them, the class is in rural Andhra. Class line was between Jamindars and the rest of the society. So, in case of Dalits, we have seen that the class lies between landless laborer and the property holders. But in case of leadership of CPI, the class line is between Jamindar and the rest of the society, in which the landholder, that is ryot and the upper caste landholder, and landless laborer, that is Dalit laborer, together forms the working class. So this is entirely a different version of working class from the Dalit activists and Dalit intellectuals who were writing in 1910s, 20s, and 1930s, and they actively you know campaigned for Kisan Mahasabhas at this time, and they campaigned for the demands of the landholders. And in the 1936, Madras government introduced Jamindari Abolition Bill, and in which they just wanted to abolish Jamindaris and distribute land to the tenant farmers. And that was the demand of Kisan Mahasabha that was also very much welcomed by the Congress Socialist Party and CPI in the 1937 and 1938. So, in the Madras government decision, there was no scope for landless laborers getting land. And most of the Dalit intellectuals, including Nakka Chinnavenkaya and many others, and some of the Adi-Andhra conferences held in this 1937-38, strongly criticized the bill introduced by the Madras government. Then Revenue Minister was Tanguturi Prakasham Pantulu, the famous Congress leader. He introduced the bill, and most of the communist leaders and socialist leaders welcomed that. They were very happy that Jamindari system will be abolished and the lands will be distributed to the tenant farmers. And then for this bill, Ambedkar also responded from Bombay, and he criticized the Prakasham bill. And he criticized that the Jamindari abolition bill of Madras government would seal any opportunity of providing land to the landless laborers. And he was also angry that the subtenants of the farmers were not recognized by the Madras bill. So here they wanted to abolish only jamindaris, but not the big landlords like farmers like Reddy, Kamma, kind of landholders who were also big landholders. The best example is the NG Ranga, who was then by then the General Secretary of All India Kisan Mahasabha, and he himself was a big landlord in his own district, and he had some hundreds of acres of land. So throughout this period, Ranga was very much talking of abolition of Jamindari, and that was the same language of CPI and the Kisan Mahasabha. So the CPI at this time was primarily, joining their voice for the upper caste landholders, and they were not recognizing the demands of the Dalit laborers that they should get land. And when CPI was officially recognized by the state, after the Russia's entry into the Second World War, government of India also recognized CPI. And when CPI recognized by the state, they actively, uh, you know, tried to spread its politics, and they in the 1940s also spoke very much similar to the All India Kisan Sabha, and similar to the Inji Ranga's lines, arguing that Jamindari system should be abolished and lands should be distributed to the tenant farmers. And they were talking of landless laborers merely as laborers. They had no vision of providing land to the landless laborers. And this was also case when they later defined the term land to the tiller in 1948. They clearly defined land to the tiller that jamindaris should be abolished, and the lands should be distributed to the tenant farmers. And the next line is landless laborers should be provided with living wages. So when they were conceptualizing the land to the tiller concept, there was no vision for them that abolition of Jamindari would lead providing land to the laborers, landless laborers. They were only thinking that abolition of Jamindari would lead to providing land to the tenant farmers. So, while that is one thing, in the 1946 elections, and they joined. I mean, they extended their support to the dominant political parties, that is Congress, wherever they have not contested. And in case of reserved seats, they declared that they will support the political party that was accepted by the Dalits in that respective regions. And in their own writings in the CPI magazines, they often declared, projected that the champion of the depressed classes or the oppressed classes was Gandhi. And Puchalpalli Sundaraya, in one public rally, declared that even in the reserved constituencies, if they are not contesting, they would support Indian National Congress. So the CPI's politics was that their class politics were not recognizing the class tensions between the landholders, that is property holders, and the landless laborers. And then their political agenda was that they would support Indian National Congress. Their support to the Indian National Congress was not something that emerged suddenly in 1946, but from 1925, CPI always tried to have a collaboration with the Indian National Congress. They never tried to collaborate with Adi-Andhra movement or Dalit activists. When they speak as Dalit activists, they always criticize, even in the 1940s, on several occasions, they have criticized Adi-Andhra Mahasabha that they were speaking for Dalits, not as economic category organization. So in the but they have not recognized that Adi Andhra Mahasabha also very actively supported the formation of Andhra Agricultural Labor Association. So in this way, CPI in the 1940s eventually remained averse with the demands of the Dalit activists, and their demand of getting land for Dalits and separate electorates. And at the same time, Dalit Marxists, those who were in the 1930s embraced socialism or Marxism, they became two groups. One group remained with CPI despite of CPI leadership's reluctance towards Dalit demands, and the other group that was largely led by Kusuma Dharmana. See, in the 1930s, he was the first who embraced socialism, and in the 1940s, he was the first who rejected the CPI. He joined Ambedkar's All India Scheduled Caste Federation. He went to Pune, the where Ambedkar. I'm a bit confused whether it was Pune or Nagpur. He went either one of these places where Ambedkar announced the formation of All India Scheduled Caste Federation, and he went there and he joined that organization. So Kusuma Dharmana, who was one of the very first Dalits, embraced socialism in the 1930s. He was one of the first Dalit Marxists who left CPI and joined Ambedkar politics, All India Scheduled Caste Federation. Of course, Kusuma Dharmana was talking of Ambedkar even in mid 1930s. Even in Nellore conference, which I mentioned in 1936, he was talking both socialism and Ambedkarism simultaneously, assuming that socialism will also be in the lines of Ambedkarism. So that's how a large chunk of Dalit Marxists who were with Marxism and socialism in the 1930s left CPI, and they joined the Scheduled Caste Federation, and they now become an important base of Ambedkarite politics, and they worked for the strengthening of Scheduled Caste Federation in Andhra. That's the story.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chandrabhanu. We learned a lot from your presentation. If you can stop sharing the screen, I can ask Professor Satyanarayana um, to come in with his comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think first uh, I thank the Kidiki collective for this invitation to be a moderator. And I've been hearing from friends that you have been doing interesting work, and some of my friends also presented as part of this. And so I'm very happy to be part of this, and also I'm very happy to be moderating this talk by Chandrabhan Murthy. I met him a few years ago, and I read a few articles that he has published in this interesting area of Dalit politics in colonial Andhra Pradesh. First, let me congratulate Chandrabhan for taking up this area for research, because there are very few scholars who are working on colonial Andhra. Telangana got a little bit of attention because of the armed struggle, but in terms of Dalit politics, very few studies, either Chennaya and you and some individual articles by maybe foreign scholars, but not much attention paid to politics, Dalit politics particularly, or politics in general in colonial Andhra Pradesh. And so in terms of the presentation, I think first thing that I want to highlight is that the kind of material that he mobilized in terms of the archive that he put together is very, very interesting. These are things that we have heard, but we have really not collected in terms of the Dalit journal, in terms of material on Adi-Andhra movement, in terms of the Dalit involvement in the communist movement, in terms of the plays and writings around what you call the phenomenon of Paleru. I mean, these are all very, very interesting, and also the administrative reports and other documents that you collected. It's like a rich material that, in fact, your paper when I was reading, which is about 45 pages, it actually has many papers in that. It's not a single paper, actually, the many papers in that. So it could really be developed into a number of kind of papers and studies, and I hope you would do that. In terms of some of the key issues to identify in the presentation, I think broadly, as I said, Dalit politics in colonial Andhra Pradesh, particularly coastal Andhra Pradesh, though I think the paper goes from the 30s to the 50s, then actually because you are following the communist trajectory, you also go to Telangana. But I think that is a little broad. Maybe you can actually confine this to the coastal Andhra of the 20s and 30s with Adi-Andhra politics and the communist politics of that, to the later armed struggle phase in Telangana, which is a slightly a different kind of phase. So I thought that is a little unmanageable if you want to take that long trajectory from the colonial to the partly post-colonial kind of a situation. That is one. And the importantly, I think the one important point that he made, which I think continued till the end, is this distinction between the riot as Kishan or a peasant, the peasant, which is a category that the communists have used, which is, I think, broadly the landed gentry, and it's a category which excludes the landless laborers. I think that's one of the important points that he makes, as opposed to what he calls the paleru or the landless laborers. So that I think the binary is very important, very central to understand how the communists actually take this position of the Kisans and then go on to mobilize people and build politics around that. And the result is that the Dalits are always outside the communist formations. I think that is one of the central points that is raising. And of course, the Paleru figure is also interesting kind of figure in terms of the kind of category that you brought into picture by using durable inequality, category inequality. I thought you might explain a little bit of that, how that really explains the Paleru phenomena or the caste relations, because that's not very clear in the paper that you refer to these two categories, to these terms, but looks interesting, but you have not elaborated a bit. That might help us. That is my first point. So the second point is also, which is this specific analysis of Dalit politics in this area. I think Chandrabhanu is also taking us to the larger field of the national politics of the Gandhi Ambedkar debate, and also the nationalists and the Dalits in the regional level, how that is played out, the Gandhi Ambedkar debate or Gandhi Ambedkar differences, and in terms of perspective and politics for Dalits, how that played out in a local kind of a setting. In fact, if you see it, the early phase, initially, even Kusma Dharmana and all others were Gandhians. Originally, the influence, the people who are talking about Dalits were actually Gandhians or the missionaries. But later, slowly, that you have both the Ambedkar and also the communists enter into the scene, and the communists occupy a lot of space at a later stage. So that trajectory is also this specific, I think, case study is important to throw some light on the larger dynamics of national kind of politics. And of course, the one the last point is that that there are the lot of these categories that you use in terms of the Adi-Andhra, and Adi-Andhra itself is not a specific caste term; it's a term of referring to a number of communities. So, of course, what you are actually talking about, the malas of coastal Andhra, where the term is not used anywhere. So, in fact, they are the malas that you are talking about. So, it's a kind of a mala history. So, I think you really have to pay some attention to some of these terms that you use. For example, you say Vannava is a Hindu nationalist, and so on. Hindu Mahasabha is a Hindu whatever. So, of course, we are located in a contemporary context of Hindu nationalist politics and so on. But you really have to pay attention and historicize each of the terms that you use, and see how you can actually progress from there. I think with this, I'll stop, and maybe towards the end, I will say something, but I will ask the audience to respond.
Perhaps Chandrabhanu would like to respond to Professor, and then we can ask the audience for comments and questions.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yes.
Okay. Uh, I'll respond to each of the comments of Professor Satyanarayana one by one. And first of all, thank you, sir, for your comments. I'm glad that you have pointed out some of the important problems here. First thing I'll talk that the topic is too stretched from the 19th century to mid 20th century. Uh, I, I I did so because I wanted to show that this class tension or the class line between Dalits and the landholder or the riots continued from early 19th century to mid 20th century, and of course even today it is continuing. Just to say that point, I went back to some of the colonial officers comments. One, and I briefly mentioned of Telangana armed struggle because in this time, during this time, one of the important Dalit leaders of Hyderabad, J.H. Subbaiah, also pointed out that the communists, uh, that is the Nijam-Andhra Mahasabha. At this time, communists were not working in the name of CPI, but they were working in the name of Nijam-Andhra Mahasabha. And he criticized that Nijam-Andhra Mahasabha was uh, actually attacking Dalits in rural Telangana for not Dalits joining their organization. And just I wanted to draw a parallel that even in case of coastal Andhra, there were such similar incidents. One of the important incidents was Kovali incident that happened in Godavari district in 1945, where the Kisan Mahasabha supported Kamma landholders when they attack Dalit laborers. So I just wanted to show that there were very much similarities in terms of Kisan Mahasabha politics of Andhra Pradesh and the Nijam Andhra Mahasabha politics of Hyderabad. Only for that purpose, I brought this comparison. Okay, I don't know like how that was a problematic. I will see how can I break that point later on. And then when it comes to categorical inequality, see the categorical inequality is that for Charles Tilly, the exploitation takes place by categorizing a group of people. So he largely draws example from South Africa, where whites categorizes Africans as blacks, and they ghettoize them and they keep them as cheap labor. So for that exploitation, the categorization was very much useful for South African white masters. And here also we can see very much similar mechanism working. Even Mergumali Chandraya, he writes very much same mechanism that caste rights by working as a group, by branding them as Dalits, they work against them as a group. It's not like one Dalit exploiting one Paleru, but rice work as a group, as a category. And the funniest part is that in 1923, before that, Kammas were organized as Kamma Mahasabhas. And in 1923, Injiranga suggested in Guntur to Kamma rights that they should not work as a Kamma organization. See, he named that Kamma organization into Guntur rights Mahasabha. See,
Yeah.
the Kammas themselves organized as rights Mahasabha. So that was an advice by Inji Ranga, who is very considered as a socialist Congress leader, the leader of Kisan Mahasabha, and he became the general secretary of All India Kisan Sabha in 1936. So why I brought this categorical inequality is to say that these rights work as a group, and they brand the rest of they brand Dalits as untouchables, and they use that to exploit the laborers, to keep them as paleru. And in this mechanism, the violence and everyday attacks, he describes that. He says that one paleru initially get some debt from a right, and he cannot repay it in entire his life. And whenever he tries to reach out some other right, the other right never supports it. Other right never try to take him into job. So, in case if he tries to go to police or any officer, the officer will first go to village head. That village head is again the some relative of the same right, because they belongs to same caste. The village head in coastal Andhra mostly Kamma. In Rayalaseema they're Reddy. So a village head is also a big upper caste landholder. So in that way, Merumala Chandraya, shows us that riots work as a category, and Dalits also a category of exploited section. So that's why I use this categorical inequality thing. And yeah, you were right. Adi-Andhra Mahasabha is largely Mala's organization. I don't know, like, I have written it in my thesis, but in this paper, for some reason, I missed it. Maybe while editing, I do remove that line somewhere. But while Adi-Andhra Mahasabha was talking as categorical inequality, their differences with the Madigas were definitely needs to be addressed. And within their discourse, they were also talking mainly as Dalit as a category. While that is an advantage for them, that was also a disadvantage, and therefore some of the Madiga leaders in the 1920s and later period, they tried to form Arundhatiya Mahasabha. Uh, but Adi-Andhra Mahasabha, here in this particular case, I got the materials more about it, so I focused on that. That was the thing. And then your next question is, uh, yeah, I think those are your questions. Did I miss anything, sir?
Yeah, I think, yeah, those are two. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will go to the others now. Those are waiting patiently. Yeah, either you can ask directly or you can also type in. There is a question in the box.
Yeah, I'm trying to read it.
Shah Mehta.
Should I read it out?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, please.
Chinnarao Yagati has published an article on Dalit mobilization by communists in Right to Kuli Sangams, and Chinnaya Jangam has written another paper called Dalit Chronicles from Telugu country. But little could I understand from these papers Dalit articulation of socialism and Marxism in their struggles against caste. The Paleru word, the way it emerged in the caste class discourse. Can Boi Bhimanna's Paleru be attributed in the similar praxis of our discussion on Dalit socialism, because this text is also published during the 1950s.
Yeah, see, Boibimana's text also speaks of the condition of Paleru. Uh, However, see, when we are talking of socialism, it is referred only as the political language used for the emancipation of Paleru or the landless laborers. And Boi Bhimanna, he knows the condition of Paleru, and he wrote that play in the 1940s. But one thing I should tell you that he was mostly with Congress leaders. He was not really kind of a part of Marxist or socialist politics, at least for my knowledge.
Okay, I think Professor Rupa Vishwanath has a question. Please go
Oh,
ahead.
Hi everyone. Banu, thank you very much for the talk, and I also really enjoyed Professor Satya's comments. I have a couple of small questions. One, you mentioned that the communists said that they would not do land redistribution, but they were interested only in what they call living wage. And I wondered whether they had a rationale for that. So to me, my guess would be, obviously they continue to need labor. So they can ignore this issue of land reform, but try to kind of partially compensate or conciliate with Dalit labor by offering something called living wage. But of course, we also know that what a living wage is a highly politicized issue. It's not obvious what would be a living wage. So did they make explicit why they suggested living wage rather than land? And also, did they have any idea how they were going to calculate what a living wage would be?
At least in the 1940s, they were not clear what is living wages. And then, see, when they were talking of living wages and not thinking of distributing land to the landless laborers, uh, see, first of all, CPI leaders, we should understand them more of, anti-colonial activists. See, they were into the Marxist politics or CPA politics, primarily to lead anti-colonial struggle. Uh, so they were going Russia in the 1920s or before that to any other European country to get the support of some international political party, so that they can lead national movement a bit radically. That is one thing. So therefore, the land question and the redistribution were always secondary things for them. Even the famous Maharashtra communist leader, uh, I forgot his name. He
Oh,
wrote a book.
Dange. Dange.
Yeah. So Donge, in his
Dange.
Lenin versus Gandhi, he discussed this issue of inequality. He says that we can address the question of inequality once we get independence. So for them, postponing the Dalit question is somewhat important. Addressing is not important. So they want to say something. So it continues well up to 1940s. So that is the rationality they have.
Thanks.
I think Pramod, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the talk. I have couple of small clarification kind of questions. You said most of the Dalits of this period articulate in terms of class. Uh, and also they also demanded a separate electorate. Am I right?
No, a slight difference. My point is, for them, when they articulate in terms of caste, they were also considering that they were articulating in terms of class. So for them, the line was not so important. For them, the differences between caste and class is no, it's our problem, not their problem. They don't have this serious division between caste versus class. So this is
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah.
scholarly problem.
Yeah, I understand, but they also demanded even Dalits in communist parties demanded a separate electorate.
Yeah.
So my question is, isn't it a contradiction?
Sorry.
Isn't it a contradiction? Because if you are articulating class interest, a separate electorate is an articulation of an identity. When because you are asking representation based on your identity as a Dalit, as an untouchable. So when not as a class. So one question. Another question I'm curious about because your categorization is a very similar categorization of a Brahmin, non-Brahmin, and Dalit. Like, is this a are you seeing a similar line, or are you differentiating even in a that article? Are you see that similarity in that kind of an articulation, or like land upper big landlord, small landholders, and landless, uh, Dalits, non-Brahmins, and Brahmins? Are you see similar categorization? And a third small question is, what is in response to Dravidian politics? Dravidian politics. How does Dravidian politics looks at uh, Dalit agriculture laborers as an issue? Thank you.
Yeah, first I will answer the third question. See, the Rodian politics is primarily of Tamil Nadu. So what I am primarily discussing is Telugu activism, Telugu writers, I mean Telugu Dalit activists. For them, this question was not there.
Madras,
Uh,
Madras province. That's the reason I asked.
Yes, I totally agree. But within Madras presidency, the Telugu politics had its own sphere, and they rarely interact. And even if they interact, they don't seriously address. I mean, at least Telugu Dalit activists do not see Dravidian politics is somewhat relevant for them. But I can say one thing that even in Tamil Nadu, Adi Dravida movement was there. Adi Dravida movement always see Justice Party or Dravidian movement as problematic. They never consider that Dravidian movement or Justice Party is something that helps them. That's why they came up with this term Adi Dravida. When they say Adi Dravida, they are differentiating with the dominant Dravidian discourse. Dravidian discourse is not something that they felt very comfortable. MC Raja and all other leaders, they were articulating Adi Dravida movement as autonomous movement. They don't want to merge into the Dravidian politics. And then, see, this itself, this also answers your first question. See, for Dalit movement, the non-Brahmin and non-Brahmin difference is not important. Both are exploiters of them. Both oppress them. So in Kusumtar Manna's writing, he says that we don't have we don't see the differences between Brahmin and non-Brahmin. In Magoti Nalladharatanamu, he wrote a poem in which he says that whether they're Brahmins or non-Brahmins, that doesn't matter, and both together oppress us. So that is one point. And then, see, when you say the class politics cannot ask for separate electorates, it's our, again, what I say is this is our assumption. We wanted them to not to ask. That's our problem. See, for them, they see themselves as a category in which they are both class and caste, and they explore all possible opportunities, and in which they see separate electorates is going to help them. That is the thing. It's not that they wanted to just go according to CPI politics. They never see that CPI is itself everything for them. Those who remained in the CPI even after 1945, they stopped asking separate electorates. There was a considerable debate within CPI whether they should support separate electorates, they should oppose. Even CPI, some of the CPI leaders argued within the party circles that they should extend support for separate electorates, but overall the party committee opposed it, and There was also a party letter of CPI in 1946 in which they circulated that as long as Gandhi supports the separate electorates, they will support it. So if Gandhi supports, they will support. See, for the reason also their opposition to separate electorates was that Gandhi and Congress is opposing that. So if Gandhi and Congress supports it, so they are ready to support. So their politics in the 1940s is completely unimaginable for us in the 2023. We really cannot digest what they did. So their reasons, their logics are completely unimaginable for us.
Yeah. No, Chandrabhanu, you did refer to Justice Party. Justice Party in coastal Andhra was a party of the landlords, the Jamindars.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in that sense, the non-Brahmin movement from Tamil Nadu was very much there. So they are all landlords.
Yeah, even in Andhra, the Justice Party was there, but only my thing is that Adi-Andhra leaders have not, engaged with Justice Party.
Yeah.
The first chief minister of Madras Presidency, that is Reddy Naidu, is from coastal Andhra. He's from Kakinada, I guess. K.V. Reddy Naidu was the first chief minister of Madras Presidency in 1921. Justice Party was there. What I said, Dravidian, the concept of Dravidian was not there in Andhra. Justice Party was there. Even non-Brahmin movement was also very active. Tribunen Ramaswamy Chaudhary, all of them were there. And of course, Tribunen Ramaswamy Chaudhary was a leader of non-Brahmin movement, but he was not with the Justice Party. He was with Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, within this non-Brahmin movement, there were two streams. One stream went with Justice Party, another stream went with the Congress Party.
I asked this, sorry, if there is no question. I asked this essentially because uh, in Maharashtra, Shetkari Kamgar Party emerged from a non-Brahmin movement, and it's a very interesting experiment. One of the leader of Shetkari Kamgar Party wrote 4 essays in their party magazine, saying why Ambedkar should be their leader and why unfortunately he is not the leader of Shetkari Kamgar Party. It's also non-Brahmin party, and Shetkari Kamgar Party also supported first Dalit in Maharashtra 1950. That period, Gairan struggle begins, and Shetkari Kamgar Party is the only party who gives support. So there is a two trends in Maharashtra. One, Shetkari Kamgar Party goes against Congress, and one stream enters in a Congress. Which party who goes against Congress? That's a Shetkari Kamgar Party is the first ML party. A. So that way, non-Brahmins also saw, Dalits also saw non-Brahmin in a allied with their interest. So that's the reason why I asked that question. Thank you.
Maybe it goes with case by case. It depends on the leaders, depends on the nature of that particular organization. How they see and how they really respond on the ground. See, non-Brahmin is not something like uniform category. Not all non-Brahmin leaders, not all non-Brahmin organizations had similar agendas, similar viewpoints. There were wide variety of leaders and activists. Yeah, ma'am.
I just wanted to, follow on this really interesting conversation that you're having and just say that it's not just about the leaders and the parties, but the agrarian structure in different states, right, is very distinct, and the proportion of Brahmins not, and different types of non-Brahmins as landlords varies very considerably across India, and that, of course, shapes the politics. And it made me think that maybe in this paper, it would be useful, Banu, for you to really be very specific about what the agrarian structure looked like and how it was changing, in the same way that I've discussed this with you a lot, in the same way that Washbrook and other people do for Tamil Nadu, to really understand what the new, because one thing that the only kind of thing I would say is kind of missing from the story that you presented is what's actually happening to the countryside right now in this period that you're talking about. How are things changing, and how are those changes producing new kinds of politics? So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can tell you briefly. See, this question was addressed at least by two scholars, one Adapa Satyanarayana and another by Stuart Brian, Brian Stuttgart. Uh, See, they pointed out two things that is very much relevant for this question. From 1850s onwards, uh, this is about the land holding pattern within dominant caste. And in the 1850s, uh, the case of Andhra's landholding pattern was somewhat similar to Tamil Nadu's landholding pattern, where the Brahmins were also considerable landholders in coastal Andhra, even in 1850s. But over a period of time, by early 20th century, like by 1910s, Brahmins left rural areas, and most of those lands went to this Kamma and Reddy and Kapu caste. The one reason they offered was that Brahmins moved away to cities, especially because of they were getting educational opportunities and jobs. And second thing is that increasingly during this time, because of the commercialization of the agriculture, Kammas and Reddys could strengthen their position against Brahmins, because the Brahmins were considerably absent landholders, so they won't uh, touch the plow. They won't go to the fields often the way Kapus and Reddys Kammas go. So this is one thing, and the other thing is that this was a period in the coastal Andhra. The dams uh, become important. The canals increased, so wet cultivation increased. So when the wet cultivation increased, that also helped the upper caste landholders, and at the same time they began articulating their own politics in the name of landholding organization. They emerged from 1850s. There emerged landholding organizations, Kakinada Farmers Association, or Godavari Landholders Association. These were some examples. They started petitioning colonial officials not to raise the tax rates, and at the same time there were also petitions that at least by late 19th century, that they should government should not help landless laborers to migrate to other parts of the world. And what happened is these government tried to give them some lands, landless laborers, but because of the objections from them, government remained slow. So the Dalit movement that we see primarily is in the coastal districts, that is delta districts. The four districts that both Godavari districts and Krishna, Gunturu, and then to some extent Nelluru. So the Dalit movement was vibrant in the delta districts, and in the delta districts, these laborers tried to get land. They went to Burma, so therefore they got some material resources to mobilize, to organize uh, for their further betterment. So this is one thing I see relevant in the transformation took place in the agrarian structure. I think there was some message.
There's a comment.
It's a question. Swati, do you want to read out?
Yeah. Besides Namburi, Guntur Bapannaya and Govada, Betala Yesudas and Tupakala Simhachalam were also important figures in communist movement in colonial Andhra. Are there any interactions between these on-ground Dalit communists and people from the Adi-Andhra movement like Kusuma Dharmana? Or are you bringing together their discrete contributions into the larger fold of Dalit Marxist understanding and mobilization of caste class politics in colonial Andhra? Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Chandrabhanu sir.
I'm sure that there was interaction between Govada Nirekshan Rao and Namburi Srinivas Rao and Guntur Bapnaya, because they together worked within CPI until late 1940s. And then Namburi Srinivas Rao left CPI in around 1950, and Govada Nirekshan Rao also left CPI around 1950. But Guntur Bapnaya remained with CPI. He had interaction with these two. But I'm like, see, with my materials, I cannot really say whether Kusuma Dharmanna had any interaction with any of them. And there were many other important Dalit Marxists. One of the another important figure appeared in Coastal Andhra was Kandikatla Nagabhushanam, who was very radical Marxist, and then he was one of the early Dalit communists died in police firings. He was very active in the Godavari districts. He was both active in Scheduled Caste Federation and also in CPA. That was an interesting case with him. He was active in both the organizations.
If there are no other questions, we can bring this to a close. Dr. Satyanarayana, would you have any comments? Um,
Yeah, I think before I close, one last point I wanted to make. Chandraman, I just wanted to suggest that, since it's a draft, when you finalize it, there are many generalizations. I think the one broad generalization from the Dalit movement is that the communist movements are anti-Dalit. They are upper caste. I agree with you, but that has to be really substantiated rather than asserted at various points. Even things like, no land distributed to the Dalits because they are all upper caste. The communist people wanted to give a living wage and so on. And at several points, you have this whole idea of the communist movement, which is very complicated. It's true that it turns out that ideology is doesn't help the Dalits, or they really emerge as anti-Dalit at some point of time. But their intention or their original formation of the Communist Party is not to oppose the Dalits or whatever. So you have to think in terms of what are the categories that they're using, why those categories doesn't explain Dalit experiences, why it turns into a problem. I think that is something that is not really explained. That is one point I wanted to add. The second point is that who are the Dalit Marxists that you're talking about? Because you're talking about two kinds of people. One, the Adi-Andhra movement, which is clearly a movement mobilized on the basis of caste identity. And then, of course, they were influenced by Gandhian and then later Ambedkar, and then they engaged with Marxism. And there are also people who worked in the communist movement who are Dalits, who can be rightly called as Dalit Marxists. So, what is the Dalit Marxism that you are talking about? That I broadly understand where you are going, but that is not very specified in the paper. There is no clarity on that. So, if you can give us a clarity when you revise it, then it will be a great paper. And there are many, many interesting issues raised. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much to Dr. Chandrabhanu and Professor Satyanarayana and all the audience members who greatly engaged with this talk. We hope it's definitely been something that I learned a lot from. So thank you to Dr. Chandrabhanu and to the audience for this fantastic discussion.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.